Today I'm going to talk about why I switched to the Nikon 100 to 400mm lens. Okay, so first, a little bit of apology. I left a lot of my attachment gear back in the car, and I'm up here at Dantes View, and I don't really want to hike back to go grab it. So we're sort of making do, improvising. Hopefully the audio quality turns out okay. But this is sort of the spot I wanted to come to talk about the 100 to 400mm lens, sort of in general, why you'd want to use one, and then why I've switched from the Sigma 100 to 400 I used to use to the Nikon 100 to 400. Okay, so first, I've come up here to Dantes View here in Death Valley to sort of talk about the 100 to 400. And the reason is because one of the prime reasons I like to use a 100 to 400mm lens, and it took a little bit to grow on me. I mean, I started my path of landscape photography like a lot of people do. Probably a mid-range zoom lens, maybe a wide-angle lens, and at least you thought early on you needed the wide-angle lens for landscape photography to get all those grand landscapes. And I followed that same path. Get the kit lens, wanted something a little wider, get a wider lens, and I thought that was it. So as things started to move on, I started to appreciate the small scenes in landscape photography. It sort of always left you with something to shoot, even if you weren't getting some amazing skies or anything like that. So small scenes was sort of a growth in my landscape photography. And a 100 to 400mm lens like this really helps with that, to simplify those scenes and find those small scenes. So if you're in a overlook like we are today, Dantes View, it's going to help me simplify certain scenes so I can pick out the details I like and highlight them. So it took me a little bit to get used to this lens, and even seeing in that focal length, when I first got my 100 to 400, it was the Sigma 100 to 400, and I did a one lens challenge with it, in fact, to sort of force myself to learn how to use it. But when I first got it, I used to leave it at home. I wouldn't take it in my pack. I'd carry a 70 to 300 because it was a little lighter, but I really was struggling to take the 100 to 400. But as I continued to make myself practice with it more, I really started to like that lens, and it became a standard carry. And again, it lets you simplify scenes, but it lets you take a grand landscape like we'll look at today and sort of simplify it into small elements. We can look out and find a certain detail that you like. With a wide-angle lens, you can't capture it because it's either far off in the distance or it's bringing in so much extra into the scene that you can't paint the same picture. But a 100 to 400 gives you that focal length to really sort of zoom in and highlight what you want people to see. So over time, like I said, I've really become a big fan of the 100 to 400. I've called it the natural evolution of landscape photographers. You can see it, you can listen to a lot of landscape photographer stories, and they sort of did the same path, wide angle lens, some, standard zoom range, and then suddenly they discovered the world of small scenes and longer focal length. So that's why I think a 100 to 400 is worth considering for your landscape photography, even though it doesn't seem like the obvious choice if you're new to it. So when I decided to start using a 100 to 400, I really wasn't looking to spend a whole lot of money. So the Nikon 100-400 was about $2,500, and I was just like, I don't even know if I'm going to like this focal length. So I started asking some questions online. It seemed like the Sigma 100-400 was a decent lens to try out. It's only $700 or $800. You can usually get it on sale, and that's the one I went with. It was inexpensive, and it's a great way to start trying out the 100-400 focal length and see if I liked it, and if I could adapt to it. And really, the Sigma lens was pretty great. You did have to use the FTZ adapter with it because it was the F-mount for Nikon, so you had to use the adapter. It wasn't too big of a deal. And then, like I said, price, you couldn't beat the price. And really, the image quality for that lens was actually pretty decent. I really don't feel like it held me back with image quality, and I thought it was a great way to learn that focal length. And I carried it a lot. Like I said, it took me a little bit to get used to using it, but once I started using it, it was a standard carry in my pack, and it was a great lens. But there were a couple things that were small cons that, as I started to really appreciate the 100 to 400 focal length and knew I really wanted to commit to it, they weren't, didn't have to replace that lens, but they were enough that I could start making excuses to replace the lens. So one of the things that annoyed me was that it used the FTZ adapter. It's not a huge deal, but it was the last lens in my landscape photography kit that used that adapter. I was like, if I could move away to it and get to a native Z series lens, that would be awesome. So a minor annoyance. I mean, it's really not a showstopper. For the price, you really can't beat it. But still, it's just one of those things. Once you start wanting something, you start to come up with excuses as to why you should get it. So that was one, still having to use the adapter. Two, the Sigma used a third-party tripod collar. And because of the buttons on the Sigma, so the tripod collar, you got the collar here and you've got the foot right here. And on the Sigma, it was a third party. It didn't come with one. And that third party, the way it fit on is the buttons were in the way, so you couldn't rotate within the collar from landscape mode to portrait mode. And initially that wasn't too bad, but it always was unwieldy. I mean, the reason I shoot with L brackets is so I can switch to portrait mode and keep my center over the tripod. And now suddenly I was back to needing to dip it off to the side in order to do a portrait style 100 to 400 shot. So again, one of those things that was annoying in the field in and of itself. Was it worth replacing and making a huge jump into the Nikon lens? Not necessarily, but once I started wanting the Nikon, it became the second reason why I wanted to upgrade to the Nikon that came with a collar. And then one more, the third and final reason that when I put them together, the other two gave me the excuse to upgrade to the Nikon lens was its minimum focusing distance. The Sigma was right around 5 feet, 5.2 feet was the closest it could focus to. And as you start to do more and more small scenes, you start to actually use it, even in, like, I've got this rock wall over here to my right. You actually, just so you don't have to switch lenses a lot, you sometimes like to walk around with that 100 to 400. And if you can use it to focus off in the overlooks and the grand landscapes to simplify scenes, and then you find some rock next to it, it's nice not to have to switch lenses. So that minimum focusing distance actually started to become a little bit of a problem when I was out. I would usually have to switch into a lens that had a better minimum focusing distance. Whereas the Nikon 100 to 400 has a minimum focusing distance of 2.4 to 3.2 feet, depending on your focal length. That allows me to, for example, here, I can potentially use this to do a small scene against this rock and then immediately turn around and shoot this overlook without needing to switch lenses. And as I started to get more and more used to those small scenes and the 100 to 400 element and really starting to use that more, that became a bigger issue for me. And so that was the third and final reason that I wanted to switch over to the Nikon 100 to 400. But really, the Sigma lens was really a pretty great lens. It served me really well. It was a great intro to the 100 to 400 world. And those three things are really just sort of nitpicky reasons to help me justify making the upgrade that I really probably didn't necessarily have to do. But with that said, let's talk about the Nikon 100 to 400. Okay, so Nikon 100 to 400 lens right here, and really by nature of knowing what I didn't like about the Sigma and what my reason for upgrading, you probably guessed some of the pros to this Nikon 100 to 400. One, image quality is amazing. It's a Nikon S-series glass, so you would expect nothing less. Really great, high quality lens, very well built, very sturdy, ready to go with you on your travel. So that's nice. That's just a good thing whenever you bump up into name brand lens. You get that high level of quality and really great image quality with it. Second, it's a native Z mount, so it attaches right here, no adapters or anything like that. And really, in comparing, it really didn't change the weight or even the size too much between the Sigma, because the Sigma with the FTZ adapter, the weight and length of the lenses were about the same. But it was native, and now it just means one less thing to carry in the field, makes for easy swaps. I don't have to remember to move the adapter from one camera to the other or something like that. So super handy on that front. We touched on minimum focusing distance. Like I said, super cool for that, because you can get in here and nice close minimum focusing distance. Just minimizes the number of times I have to make a lens swap. Today it's getting windy, that's why I'm hunkered down by these rocks, trying to shelter the audio as much as I can. Because I can photograph down over this overlook over the Badwater Basin down below, and then immediately, if I want, come over to these rocks or these plants and not have to make so many lens changes. And with the wind, it helps keep the dust and dirt from getting in my camera. So that minimum focusing distance became more important to me. And then finally, we talked about the collar, but this one, you can just rotate it to portrait mode, screw, turn, makes it super handy. Again, it's efficiency in the field. So many things I do is about efficiency in the field. Whenever I talk about filters, I talk about efficiency, because I think if you're more efficient in the field and things are easier, you're more likely to try creative things, as opposed to, you know, get that lazy, well, it takes so much to turn over and reposition. Keep things efficient and easy, I think, is a good thing. So the tripod collar was a big thing. Okay, but it's not without its cons. One, this is a really expensive lens, around $2,500. If I wasn't sure I liked the 100 to 400 focal length so much, this obviously was prohibitive, which is why I ended up with the Sigma to start with. Now that I know I love the focal length and as minimum focusing distance become more important, spending the money is not quite as big a deal. This lens is going to last me a long time. I'm not making any plans to switch away from Nikon, but it is not inexpensive. And then the second con is it came with a stock foot on it, and it attached right here. But the problem was it wasn't Arca Swiss compatible. So all my tripods are Arca Swiss compatible, so I can just switch things. My video cameras are Arca Swiss. Everything's Arca Swiss, so I can always have a tripod. Like today, I left my video tripod in the car, but my main camera tripod uses Arca Swiss. It was easy to put the Action 4 up on the tripod and attach it, because everything's Arca Swiss. So to make it work on that foot, I would have had to add a plate, and then plates start to move and they're not as sturdy. So I did have to buy a third-party foot. I bought a Kirk LP70. It is a nice beefy foot. It was about $100, so add that to the price of the lens, but it's super beefy. You can hold on to the whole camera just like this, and it's Arcus Swiss compatible all the way through here. And I feel like it's necessary to really make this lens work, at least if you're as picky about your tripod mounts as me. So that is a con too. For a camera that costs that much money, I don't see why they don't just adapt at least to Arcus Swiss. It's so popular. I'm sure there's some reason, and I'm sure someone in the comments down below is going to let me know why Arcus Swiss is inferior and the flexibility is good. Either way, I was able to swap it out and things worked good. Okay, so I've used the Nikon 100-400 on several trips now. I had it with me on several of my Arizona trips, so a lot of those 100-400 shots were shot with the Nikon 100-400. And of course, I brought it out here to Death Valley. And that's why we're doing the video up here. This is, again, like I said earlier in the video, this is Dantes View. Got a little windy today. Don't have all my gear, so hopefully this all works out. But I wanted to just sort of talk through the whole simplifying scenes as I sort of walk through with the Nikon 100-400. Before we dive into that, been super happy with Nikon 100-400. And I think if you're into small scenes photography and you're a Nikon shooter and you already know you like that 100-400 millimeter length, the lens is worth it. It's gonna last a long time, quality's good. That minimum focusing distance is, again, just one of those efficiency things that make your life as a landscape photographer just easier. So it's the small things, they all add up. If I wasn't a huge fan of 100-400, if you still prefer the grand landscapes, and that's what you go to, and you just want the 100-400 occasionally, this Sigma's gonna serve you fine. Mine was doing good. As I moved more into these small scenes, that 100-400 has been super cool. So with that said, we're gonna try to work through this. We're gonna set up the 100-400 here. I've already been here for a little bit, and I'll show you some of the pictures from here. But Dantes View, what's interesting about it is we're about 5,000 feet, and there's some big winds coming into Death Valley. Anyways, it's cold, but it overlooks Badwater Basin, which has the salt flats in it and everything like that. And the lowest point in the continental United States, might even be the United States total. I don't have Google, so you guys are gonna have to fact check me down in the comments below. But the interesting thing today is last time I was out here, it's normally a dry lake bed. It's got salt deposits and things like that with all sorts of interesting patterns. Well, now Lake Manly has formed with Storm Hillary that came through California last, I want to say it was August, November. It flooded numerous areas in the park, closed lots of roads. And then they had the atmospheric river that came through 2 weeks ago and sort of replenished the water in it again. So there's literally a lake down in Badwater Basin down here, giving us some interesting, cool pieces too. So that's why we're up here at this overlook, because like I said earlier, 100-400 can help simplify scenes. I'm going to look over this, and instead of doing a big, full, grand landscape, I'm going to be able to take the 100-400 and find certain spots down here in the basin that I want to highlight and emphasize. I can look for patterns, I can look for textures, I can look for colors, I can look for where the water is, where the salt deposits are. There's just a variety of things to look at. So we're just going to walk through that and talk with the 100-400. We'll take a few pictures, we'll share those pictures in the video, and we'll just play with 100-400, and we'll wrap this thing up. Okay, what I've set up here is sheltered from the wind, tripod. We got the Nikon Z7 II with the 100-400. I do have a linear polarizer from Maven on the front, just sort of take some of the glare off, any kind of the water or anything like that down there. And we've got this massive valley that opens out in front of us, right? And there's the Lake Manly down in here, and then there's little streams of water through here, and then there's salt deposits. And then you throw in, we have just enough partly cloudy that we're getting the nice little dappled light across the scene below here. So super happy with my decision to come up here today. Wasn't sure which day I was going to do it. Today's working out well. And composing a good grand landscape is actually really tough. So you just have this massive scene. And I did pop out the 24-120. I did some wider shots and things like that. But what I'm really up here for, and my objective is to highlight different patterns in the dappled light in the whole bit. And I just can't do that. Even with the 24-120, I can't get zoomed in close enough sometimes. So the 100-400 is going to let me just really zoom in into that valley floor and look for patterns to put together, how the salt plays against the sand, how the water plays against it, how the sun hits. And that's really what the 100-400 is. If you notice, I also have these mountain peaks. I always mess this up. I have these mountain peaks over this way as well. I could play with those and highlight just one. That's Telescope Peak, I believe, right there. And I could play with the 100-400 side, isolate that. So instead of doing the whole ridge line, I could do just Telescope Peak. Or we talked about dappled light. We've got the sun and the clouds moving light patterns through here. Right now, there's nothing super spectacular, a little hazy, But if the clouds build up and you get those certain points of light, you can use that 100-400 to simplify the scene, really zoom in and get that. So again, I probably belabored the why 100-400 enough. I just know if you're like me and it took a little bit to make that transition, it's well worth making the transition. It's been a really great lens. So what we're gonna do here, like I said, it's gonna be tricky because I'm sort of hand holding the camera as well, because I have none of my cool attachments that I carried all the way from Ohio to California. They're in the car. I don't know what I was thinking. We're gonna roll a little bit of video of just sort of the whole scene, and then I'm going to take just a handful of shots through here, and then I'll pop them up on the screen, and so you'll get to see the big grand landscape through the video, and I'll pop in how I sort of simplified that scene with it, and you can just sort of see what I'm talking about. You'll see the grand view, drop in a couple stills, and we'll see how that works out. Sort of scattered today between the wind and my gear being back there, and I always get overwhelmed at the new location, so it's good. We'll see how this video turns out. So anyways, yeah, that's what we'll do. Then we're going to wrap this thing up. Okay, so hopefully you enjoyed some of the scenes and some of the talk about simplifying scenes and why a 100-400 might be useful for your landscape photography. Like I said, I'm super happy with the Nikon 100-400, but the Sigma 100-400 served me well. The three things I came up with it are really minor nitpicks and used more to justify me upgrading than absolute necessity to upgrade. I could have kept using that 100-400 from Sigma and still got some great shots. Just always looking for excuses to upgrade the gear, right? Anyways, like I said, I hope you found this video helpful. Like I said, it might be a little rough, but I did want to talk about this 100-400. I've had it for a while now. So, yeah, if you found it helpful, be sure to hit that like button. If you see future landscape photography content from me, including tips, tricks, behind the scenes, mini gear reviews, be sure to hit that subscribe button. And thank you for watching.